When talking about disabilities, first recognize that in the term disability, we're talking about different levels of some ability that were just mentioned, usually some physical ability. When an organization assesses job candidates based on their abilities, it can cause difficulties when developing policies that recognize that people are diverse in terms of the abilities that they bring to the job. While it's important that the organization strive for diversity in the hiring process, it's also important to be careful to avoid discriminatory practices during the hiring process by making generalizations about people with disabilities. Current legal precedents with the Americans with Disabilities Act states that businesses must take reasonable steps in order to fine-tune the job in order to accommodate people with disabilities. Now, this obviously doesn't mean that the entire job has to be redesigned. For example, it would be unreasonable for UPS to hire someone to navigate for a visually impaired delivery person, but for instance, in an office environment, it would be perfectly acceptable to expect a company to provide adequate screen reading software for a visually impaired worker. That would be a accommodation that the company would have to make. For a worker who's answering customer emails, for example, visual sight is not needed, and because of that, the company needs to make reasonable accommodations to allow him to do his job effectively. Simply recognizing that people are different is not in and of itself sufficient for organizations to operate effectively with these differences. Managers need to develop conflict strategies to come up with ways to effectively work with different types of diversity in order to get the outcomes that we're looking for. In diversity management starts by recruiting, selecting, developing, and ultimately retaining employees who are comfortable working in a workplace with diverse individuals, either in terms of their surface level diversity, their demographic characteristics, or deeper level differences. And as we can see when we consider screening applicants, it's going to be important that if we're going to work in a team-based environment, that we go about selecting employees who are good team players and can work well with people who are either demographically or even in terms of values and knowledge different from themselves. Gaining a diverse workforce through the selection process and then developing them through organizational training and development programs will help to develop an environment that fosters creativity and effectiveness and ultimately profitability by tapping into the potential of all of our employees. More and more organizations are requiring employees to work in groups and teams, and we know that within the groups and teams environment, diversity can add to group effectiveness, but it can also diminish it through conflict. The organization must provide the tools necessary to leverage differences in order to maintain performance. Effective workplace programs that encourage diversity contain multiple components. First, they're going to need to teach managers what they need to know in order to follow equal opportunity requirements. What is it that managers need to know in order to not get sued? Secondly, an effective diversity management program should help our managers and our employees to see that a diverse workplace can be better able to serve diverse markets. And finally, they need to be able to take into account that personal differences in the approach, in styles and strengths can also be used to enhance organizational performance. In summary, it should be fairly widely known that we aren't clones in the workforce, and people are going to have different skills, different abilities. When it comes to how we deal with diversity, in first looking at surface level diversity, that surface level diversity should be minimized in personnel decisions. We need to take steps to make sure that protected classes of older workers, minority workers, workers with disabilities are not discriminated against, because even the perceptions of discrimination can open the door to lawsuits, which is going to cost the company millions of dollars, even if they are eventually dismissed. We can try to work to hire employees with different abilities. We know that different abilities are going to have the potential to lead to a more creative environment, so long as people have the conflict management and openness to diversity skills necessary to deal with people who are different from themselves.